Welcome to Xi Jinping briefing. The content of the briefing includes: U.S. looms large as Russia's Putin talks up historic China ties, analyst. Bring back the free trade agenda. Jason Momoa is given very little to work with. Giant panda gives Biden a helping hand on SNL. Letter from Nikkei Asia's editor, Southeast Asia's digital battle royale. U.S. looms large as Russia's Putin talks up historic China ties, analyst. South China Morning Post. Russian President Vladimir Putin's recent comments on the relationship between Russia and China are seen as a response to recent diplomatic efforts between China and the U.S. Putin's declaration that relations with China have reached a new height indicates that Moscow is worried about a possible U.S.-China détente. The Sino-Russian relationship is described as truly unique and has never reached such a height and quality in the history of our states, according to Putin. The relationship between China and the U.S. has made Russia nervous, and Putin's comments are seen as an attempt to influence global public opinion. Bring back the free trade agenda. Bloomberg. The shift against free trade in the U.S. is a result of a prolonged period of labor market slack, according to Bloomberg. The article argues that the idea of protecting jobs from foreign competition seemed compelling when the U.S. had low interest rates, low inflation, and a depressed prime-age employment rate. But with jobs now plentiful and inflation becoming a top concern for voters, the U.S. should be looking to open markets to competition and reduce tariffs in order to lower prices and combat inflation. Jason Momoa is given very little to work with. The Guardian. Saturday Night Live opened with a skit featuring President Joe Biden holding a press conference after his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. In the skit, Biden boasts about his accomplishments at the meeting, including securing more pandas for America, but then calls Xi a dictator, undoing his accomplishment. The skit is described as a real shrug and lacking in humor. The rest of the episode is similarly criticized for its lack of interesting or memorable moments. In one skit, Aquaman star Jason Momoa plays a bouncer at a Miami nightclub who can't turn people away without calling them ugly. Another skit takes place at an airport during Thanksgiving week, featuring frazzled travelers, a sleazy drunk pilot, and a woman who claims one of the passengers isn't real. The episode also features a short video from Please Don't Destroy and musical performances by Tate McRae and Remember Lizards. Overall, the episode is described as a stumble compared to the previous two episodes, and Momoa is said to have done his best with the material he was given. Giant panda gives Biden a helping hand on SNL. The Independent. The opening skit of Saturday Night Live featured a parody of President Joe Biden's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, with a giant panda as a special guest. The skit poked fun at the meeting and the focus on pandas, with the fake Biden expressing his desire for more pandas. The real President Xi recently stated that he will send more pandas to the U.S., after 3 were returned to China earlier this month. The skit highlighted the tension between the two countries and the focus on pandas as a symbol of friendship. Letter from Nikkei Asia's editor, Southeast Asia's digital battle royale. Nikkei Asia. The recent meeting between U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping at the APEC summit in San Francisco has been described as successful, with Xi appearing friendly and smiling throughout. This is in contrast to a meeting in 2014 between Xi and then Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, where Xi arrived late, appeared unfriendly, and did not make eye contact with Abe. Despite the more positive tone of the recent meeting, it is unlikely that U.S.-China relations will improve in the near future, as both countries continue to compete fiercely in various sectors. APEC over, Taiwan reports renewed Chinese military activity. Japan Times. Taiwan has reported a renewed Chinese military activity around the island, with 9 aircraft crossing the sensitive median line of the Taiwan Strait and warships conducting combat readiness patrols. This comes as Taiwan has complained for the past 4 years about regular Chinese military patrols and drills near the island. The military activity had previously leveled off during Chinese leader Xi Jinping's visit to San Francisco for the APEC summit. China links could weaken his role on world stage as UK Foreign Secretary. The Guardian. Concerns have been raised over UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron's links to a Chinese-backed development project in Sri Lanka. Cameron reportedly spoke at 2 events promoting the Port City Colombo development, which is being constructed by a Chinese state-owned company. He is said to have been paid $210,000 for the speeches. Critics have warned that the project could become a Chinese military outpost in the Indo-Pacific, a claim denied by Sri Lanka's Minister of Investment Promotion. Cameron has also been accused of a conflict of interest in his new role as Foreign Secretary. Calls have been made for him to disclose all his financial interests. Cameron's association with the Port City Colombo project follows his previous enthusiasm for UK-China relations when he was Prime Minister. However, since his resignation, successive UK governments have adopted a more cautious approach to China, banning the Chinese telecommunications firm Huawei from the country's 5G network. What another Trump presidency would mean for the world. Telegraph. The odds of Donald Trump winning a second term as U.S. president are shortening, with polls showing that he is neck and neck with current President Joe Biden. Trump trails Biden in 5 of the 6 most important swing states, but voters still prefer him to Biden on issues including immigration, national security, and the economy. Trump's legal woes, including 2 civil trials and 91 felony charges, have not hindered his popularity among his supporters, who believe that the charges are part of an attempt by the deep state to prevent him from regaining power. The fear among liberals is rising as Trump has publicly stated what he would do if re-elected, including pardoning the January 6 insurrectionists and disbanding the deep state by removing civil servants and replacing them with loyalists. Biden's unpopularity is a key factor in Trump's resurgence, which is not surprising given that Trump lost the popular vote in the last 2 presidential elections. However, Biden's economic policies are similar to Trump's, and he has made progress in some areas, such as supporting Ukraine and building relations with countries in the Middle East. Trump's age is also a factor, as he appears to have more energy and vigor than the 80-year-old Biden, who occasionally slurs his words and makes gaffes. Trump's plans for a second term include reversing Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, imposing tariffs on imports from countries that impose tariffs on U.S.-made goods, and cracking down on immigration. There are still obstacles that could prevent Trump from winning a second term, including his legal troubles and the possibility that Biden may not run for re-election. Even if Trump is re-elected, the U.S. Constitution and the courts would prevent him from amassing too much power and ruling like a dictator. However, the fear among liberals is real, as Trump has publicly stated his plans for revenge and has a track record of defying political norms. The stakes are high, and the outcome of the next election will have significant implications for the U.S. and the wider world. Government defends Anthony Albanese for not raising Chinese warship incident with Xi Jinping. ABC. The Australian government has defended Prime Minister Anthony Albanese over his failure to raise a naval incident with China's Navy with President Xi Jinping. The incident involved a Chinese warship operating its hull-mounted sonar, which caused injuries to Australian naval divers. The government has expressed serious concerns to China about the unsafe and unprofessional interaction. The coalition has demanded an explanation as to why the Prime Minister did not raise the matter with President Xi in person. Abandon the China threat talk or risk upset in China-US reset, ex-envoy. South China Morning Post. Former Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Kang Xianyu has argued that the narrative of China being a threat must be eliminated in order for the US-China relationship to progress. Speaking at an international relations forum in Singapore, Kang stated that China has no intention of competing with or replacing the US and that being the number one power is not the most important issue. He called for less attention to be placed on competition and more on collaborations between China, Asia, and the West. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 Degrees world, here to bring you the latest news and analysis. Today, we have an interesting mix of stories that touch on international relations, comedy skits, and the potential return of a former US president. Let's dive in. First, we have Russian President Vladimir Putin's comments on the relationship between Russia and China. It seems that Moscow is feeling a bit uneasy about the recent diplomatic efforts between China and the US. Putin's declaration that relations with China have reached a new height indicates that he wants to influence global public opinion and remind everyone of the truly unique relationship between the two countries. It's like he's saying, hey, don't forget about us. Speaking of the US, there's a discussion about the shift against free trade in the country. Bloomberg argues that with jobs now plentiful and inflation becoming a top concern for voters, it's time for the US to open markets to competition and reduce tariffs. They're saying, hey, let's bring back the free trade agenda and lower prices to combat inflation. It's an interesting perspective, especially when protectionism seems to be gaining popularity. Now, let's talk about some comedy. Saturday Night Live had a skit featuring President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping. It seems like the skit didn't quite hit the mark, described as a real shrug lacking in humor. But hey, comedy is subjective, right? Jason Momoa did his best with the material he was given, but overall, the episode was a stumble compared to the previous ones. Sometimes, even the funniest people can't work miracles with lackluster material. Moving on to international relations, we have the recent meeting between US President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping. The skit on SNL actually referenced this meeting, poking fun at the focus on pandas as a symbol of friendship. It's interesting how these seemingly trivial things can become representative of larger tensions between countries. Pandas, who knew they could be so politically relevant? In other news, Taiwan has reported renewed Chinese military activity, with aircraft crossing the sensitive Taiwan Strait and warships conducting combat readiness patrols. This comes as no surprise, as Taiwan has been complaining about regular Chinese military patrols for the past 4 years. It's a reminder that tensions in the region continue to simmer, even as leaders put on friendly faces during international summits. Shifting gears, concerns have been raised over UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron's links to a Chinese-backed development project in Sri Lanka. Critics claim that the project could become a Chinese military outpost, but Sri Lanka's Minister of Investment Promotion denies these allegations. It's a reminder of the delicate dance that countries have to play when it comes to their relationships with China. The UK has taken a more cautious approach since Cameron's time as Prime Minister, but this recent revelation raises questions about his current role as Foreign Secretary. Now, let's discuss the elephant in the room, the potential return of former US President Donald Trump. Polls show that he is neck and neck with President Biden, and his legal troubles don't seem to be hindering his popularity among his supporters. Liberals are growing more fearful as Trump openly talks about what he would do if re-elected, including pardoning the January 6 insurrectionists and dismantling the deep state. It's a reminder that politics can be unpredictable, and the outcome of the next election will have significant implications for the US and the world. Lastly, we have former Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Kang Xianyu calling for the elimination of the narrative that China is a threat. Kang argues that China has no intention of competing with or replacing the US and that collaboration should be the focus. It's like he's saying, hey, let's work together and stop seeing each other as enemies. It's an interesting perspective, especially as the US-China relationship continues to be a topic of intense debate. So, my dear viewers, what are your thoughts on these stories? Do you agree with Putin's attempt to influence global public opinion? Should the US bring back the free trade agenda? And what about the potential return of Donald Trump? I'm eager to hear your thoughts and answer any questions you may have. Let's keep the conversation going. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.